Hello and welcome back to Silver Serenity. I'm Dr. John. Today we are exposing the so-called healthy breakfast that seniors are eating every morning, which secretly spikes blood sugar levels equivalent to devouring 14 teaspoons of pure granulated sugar, dangerously increasing your risk of dementia and heart failure. But don't panic. I will walk you through exactly which common item this is and provide 3 easy, delicious alternatives you can switch to immediately. If you or a loved one are serious about protecting your cognitive health and maximizing your energy well into your golden years, it cannot afford to miss this vital warning. First, please share your city, age, and the specific health concerns you are currently facing in the comments below. Then hit the like button and subscribe to Silver Serenity for more life-saving nutritional deep dives.
The gentle decline of taste sensitivity often leads older adults to seek more pronounced flavors, unwittingly inviting the villain of modern nutrition, added sugar. This adversary doesn't just lurk in obvious culprits like cakes and candies. It wears a master of disguise costume, hiding inside savory sauces, salad dressings, and even healthy low-fat yogurt. The statistics are jarring. A significant portion of the sugar consumed in the U.S. diet originates from ultra-processed foods. These engineered convenience items are crafted not for longevity, but for maximum palatability and shelf life, creating a double bind for seniors who rely on accessibility. The sheer volume of refined sweeteners, from high fructose corn syrup to dextrose, sneaking into the daily intake guarantees an unnecessary caloric load with zero nutritional redemption, paving the way for metabolic chaos long before a noticeable symptom manifests. We must move past the naive assumption that a senior's diet is automatically wholesome just because it appears small or home-cooked. The biological impact of this excessive intake moves swiftly from benign weight gain to critical organ stress. For the aging cardiovascular system, sugar acts as an accelerant to inflammation and systemic dysfunction. Studies have conclusively linked high added sugar consumption to increased cardiovascular disease mortality among adults. Imagine the heart already laboring after decades of faithful service, now being tasked with managing spikes of glucose and insulin resistance brought on by a morning bowl of heart-healthy instant oatmeal that contains more sugar than a candy bar. We are essentially asking our engines to run on poor quality fuel while simultaneously demanding peak performance. Doctors often caution against salt and saturated fat, which are indeed relevant dangers, but the silent, persistent torrent of fructose overload seems to receive a softer warning, perhaps because sugar is delicious, and frankly, who wants to tell grandma she can't have her seemingly innocuous afternoon juice? In this discussion, we must also acknowledge the broader systemic havoc wreaked by these sweeteners. The relationship between chronic energy surplus, fueled heavily by added sugars, and increased body fatness is undisputed, placing the elderly population at heightened risk for several forms of cancer. The sheer efficiency of sugar-sweetened beverages SSBs in delivering massive, biologically impactful doses of sugar makes them public health enemy number 1. A single can of soda or commercially prepared sweet tea provides a catastrophic dose without triggering the necessary satiety signals. This liquid form bypasses normal digestion speed, leading to swift, dramatic metabolic disturbance. It is a key global health issue that disproportionately affects those whose metabolic flexibility is already waning. It's almost comical how companies market beverages promising vitality when they are, in fact, delivering a rapid-fire sugar bullet straight to the liver. Perhaps the most cruel assault of hidden sugars in the elderly is against cognitive function. Research focusing on older adults demonstrates a clear correlation between different sources of sugar consumption and decreased performance in memory and executive function. The brain, heavily reliant on stable glucose levels, suffers dramatically under the repeated onslaught of hyperglycemia and subsequent crashes. This isn't merely about preventing diabetes. It's about preserving the quality of life. the clarity of thought, and the capacity for independent decision-making. Identifying hidden sugars is not an exercise in nutritional pedantry, but a crucial step in geriatric health preservation. It requires meticulous label reading, seeking out terms like maltose, syrup solids, and corn sweeteners, to finally unmask the deceptively sweet antagonist that threatens both the body and the mind of our senior population. The antagonist, once unmasked, reveals its primary weapon: the systemic degradation of the cardiovascular system. High consumption of added sugars, often hidden within ultra-processed foods, is not merely linked to weight gain. It is a direct contributor to elevated triglyceride levels, increased low-density lipoprotein LDL cholesterol, and chronic inflammation. Epidemiological data confirm that excessive added sugar intake significantly amplifies the risk of cardiovascular disease (CVD) mortality, particularly among adults consuming 25% or more of their daily calories from these processed sweeteners. This is especially pertinent for the older adult whose vascular system is already contending with age-related stiffening and reduced elasticity. The persistent osmotic stress and resulting endothelial damage from chronic hyperglycemia create a fertile environment for atherosclerosis, transforming common culinary indulgences into genuine threats to heart function and longevity. The metabolic consequences escalate rapidly. Sustained high sugar intake forces the liver into overdrive, leading to visceral fat deposition and insulin resistance, the twin pillars of metabolic syndrome. The subsequent obesity, particularly central adiposity, is recognized not just as a cosmetic issue, but as an independent and robust risk factor for numerous non-communicable diseases, including several types of cancer. It seems that while we were busy optimizing our supplements and walking routines, the food industry was subtly rerouting our caloric intake through delightful, cheap syrups, guaranteeing future clients for the pharmaceutical industry. The irony is bittersweet. Literally, sugar-sweetened beverages (SSBs) are the most egregious contributors, delivering massive, concentrated doses that shock the system and bypass natural satiety cues, effectively creating a physiological debt that must be paid in chronic disease management later in life. This systematic metabolic disruption compromises the body's ability to regulate energy, accelerating the pathway toward type 2 diabetes. In this discussion, we must also address the insidious impact of high sugar loads on the aging brain. While the link between glucose and brain function is undeniable, evidence suggests that different sources of sugar consumption affect cognitive performance differently in older adults. Regular consumption of refined sugars, often found in packaged sweets, sauces, and breakfast cereals, is associated with poorer performance on tasks measuring executive function and memory. This suggests that the metabolic distress caused by constant glucose spikes and crashes is translated into neurological impairment, potentially exacerbating age-related cognitive decline or increasing susceptibility to neurodegenerative processes. The brain, which consumes a disproportionate amount of the body's energy, struggles to maintain optimal function when fueled by an inconsistent and inflammatory substrate like highly processed sugar, demanding stabilization for geriatric neurological health. The collected evidence presents a formidable case against the unrestricted consumption of added sugars in the senior demographic. The danger is holistic. Cardiovascular mortality risk is amplified, metabolic function is degraded into chronic syndrome, and cognitive vitality is systematically undermined. Limiting added sugar intake is one of the most effective, yet challenging, preventative measures in geriatric nutrition. Experts strongly recommend that older adults, especially those with existing risk factors, restrict added sugars to less than 10% of total caloric intake, ideally striving for 5%. This strategic nutritional reduction acts as a critical intervention to reduce systemic inflammation, stabilize glucose homeostasis, and ultimately preserve the quality of life against the pervasive saccharin threat. The strategic avoidance of excess sugar becomes particularly urgent when considering neurocognitive integrity. High consumption of added sugars, particularly fructose and sucrose, drives chronic, low-grade systemic inflammation, a mechanism researchers now strongly linked to the acceleration of Alzheimer's disease and vascular dementia. The brain, relying heavily on glucose for energy, suffers profoundly when excessive sugar intake leads to insulin resistance. Neurons struggle to uptake the necessary fuel efficiently, causing metabolic confusion and oxidative stress. This neuronal starvation, sometimes morbidly dubbed type 3 diabetes, impairs synaptic plasticity and communication pathways. Studies focusing on older adults reveal a clear dose-response relationship. Higher intake of sugar-sweetened beverages and ultra-processed foods corresponds directly to diminished memory and executive function. In this discussion, the scientific literature paints a damning picture of the American diet, where added sugars often constitute up to 17% of total daily calories, far exceeding recommended safety margins. A significant portion of this intake comes from sugar-sweetened beverages, the silent assassins of public health, which contribute powerfully to cardiovascular disease mortality. The irony is bitter. Consumers are lured by vibrant packaging proclaiming natural fruit flavors or energy boosts, while the product delivers a biochemical sledgehammer. It is a cynical triumph of marketing over metabolism, convincing millions that drinking a 64-ounce fluorescent sludge is somehow a viable hydration strategy. This pervasive exposure doesn't just impact the brain. It creates a fertile ground for wider systemic failure. The health ramifications extend far beyond just cognitive and cardiac issues. The link between increased adiposity, often fueled by chronic high sugar consumption, and various forms of cancer has been firmly established by international working groups. Excessive sugar intake contributes to visceral fat accumulation, which acts as an endocrine organ, secreting pro-inflammatory. The issue is compounded because added sugars rarely travel alone. They are usually embedded in ultra-processed matrices, characterized by high sodium and unhealthy fats. These engineered foodstuffs strip the diet of essential nutrients while overloading the system with refined energy, creating a dangerous synergy that accelerates biological aging. For seniors, this triple threat means the risk of frailty and dependency is sky. Crucially, recent analysis using comprehensive national health surveys confirm that specific sources of sugar are more detrimental to the aging mind than others. Sugars consumed through solid foods, like desserts and candies, showed a more pronounced negative correlation with cognitive performance in older adults than sugar from certain beverages. This distinction suggests that the physical form and associated nutritional load play a significant role in neurodegeneration risk. Therefore, protecting the golden years requires meticulous attention not just to how much sugar is consumed, but where it originates. Achieving the goal of less than 5% caloric intake from added sugars is perhaps the single most potent nutritional prescription available to preserve mental acuity and ensure a truly dignified, healthy longevity. Resisting the lure of the processed food industry is economy. Therefore, protecting the golden years requires meticulous attention, not just to how much sugar is consumed, but where it originates. Achieving the goal of less than 5% caloric intake from added sugars is perhaps the single most potent nutritional prescription available to preserve mental acuity and ensure a truly dignified, healthy longevity. Resisting the lure of the processed food industry is economy. In this discussion, we turn our diagnostic lens toward the silent saboteurs lurking in foods that frequently market themselves under the banner of health. The true challenge lies not in avoiding the obvious candy bar, but in deciphering the ingredient list of items like yogurt, breakfast cereals, and fruit juices. The ultra-processed mainstays that contribute a disproportionate amount of added sugar to the average diet, often surpassing 60% of total sugar intake for many consumers. These items are the Trojan horses of modern nutrition, promising vitality while delivering a payload of concentrated sweetness that undermines cellular health. Consider the breakfast staple, yogurt. Consumers often seek out low-fat versions, believing they are making the healthier choice. Yet, when fat is removed, flavor must be reinstated. And the cheapest, most efficient way to achieve palatability is through sugar. A single serving of fruit on the bottom, yogurt can easily contain 6 to 7 teaspoons of added sugar, rivaling a candy bar, and critically contributing to the cumulative burden linked to increased cardiovascular disease mortality. Similarly, breakfast cereals, even those fortified with vitamins and marketed with cheerful health halos, are often nothing more than refined carbohydrates sprayed with a crystallized sugar mixture. They are designed to create a rapid, rewarding dopamine hit, expertly disguising simple starch and sugar as essential fiber and whole grains. It seems the modern grocery defines health as anything that keeps the shelf life long and the consumer perpetually craving the next bowl. The caloric density and absorption speed of liquid sugars make sugar-sweetened beverages, including many commercially bottled fruit juices, especially insidious. When the body consumes sugar dissolved in liquid form, the satiety mechanisms are bypassed, meaning one can drink hundreds of empty calories without registering fullness. This rapid spike, consistently repeated, drives insulin resistance and systemic inflammation. This persistent inflammatory state is not merely linked to chronic conditions, but fundamentally alters the metabolic environment, fostering an environment where diseases such as cancer are given fertile ground. Although a bottle might claim 100% vitamin C, it conveniently omits that the concentration of fructose is biologically equivalent to a soda, ensuring a guaranteed delivery of systemic distress with every cheerful sip. Recognizing these patterns becomes vital when considering the brain's vulnerability. Recent evidence confirms that higher cumulative consumption of sugars, particularly from processed sources, is directly associated with measurable declines in cognitive performance and executive function in older adults. The brain, dependent on stable glucose delivery, struggles profoundly under the chaos of repeated sugar surges. Protecting our cognitive longevity requires vigilance. Always check the added sugars line on the nutrition label and prioritize ingredients lists free of high fructose corn syrup, dextrose, and syrups ending in O's. Only by systematically dismantling the ultra-processed diet can we assure that our advanced years are marked by sharp minds and robust bodies, rather than yielding to the systemic decay fueled by hidden sweetness. The battlefield against hidden sweetness begins not in the kitchen, but in the grocery aisle. The 2016 nutritional label overhaul provided a crucial weapon: the dedicated added sugars line. Previously, manufacturers cleverly lumped naturally occurring sugars like lactose in milk with refined, empty caloric additives. Now, we have clarity. This metric must be the first number you scrutinize, and ideally, that number should hover near zero. Ultra-processed foods, as documented by rigorous studies, account for nearly 90% of the total added sugar intake in the US diet. Therefore, approaching any pre-packaged item, regardless of its health halo claims, be it organic, natural, or gluten-free, requires the suspicious eye of a seasoned detective trained to expect deception. The secondary line of defense lies in the ingredients list itself. Sugar has adopted more aliases than an international jewel thief. Be relentless in identifying every iteration: high fructose corn syrup, dextrose; maltose, corn syrup, solids, cane juice, and every sugary substance ending in "-ose." A vital practical strategy is the 3-ingredient rule. If any form of sugar appears within the first 3 items, the concentration is dangerously high, and the product must be summarily rejected. The industry marketing departments are staffed by wizards trying to camouflage simple crystalline poison as wholesome goodness. They deserve an Oscar for deceptive packaging. If not a federal indictment, protecting our cognitive function, particularly as we age, demands this uncompromising approach to ingredient vigilance. In this discussion, pada pembahasan kali ini, we must shift our focus from ingredient lists to product categories that serve as systemic health threats. The single most catastrophic vector for added sugar consumption is sugar-sweetened beverages, as these liquid calories provide zero satiety and are uniquely destructive, directly linked to increased cardiovascular disease mortality. The link between excessive sugar intake and systemic inflammation cannot be overstated. It feeds the underlying body fatness that contributes significantly to certain types of cancer risk. Eliminating soda, sweetened iced teas, and sports drinks is not merely an option. It is the foundational imperative for mitigating the greatest mortality risks associated with the modern diet. Implementing reduction strategies is about systematic replacement, not just painful denial. Start small by tackling breakfast items, which are often insidious sugar traps disguised as wholesome cereals or instant oatmeal. Replace flavored yogurts, which can contain a staggering 20+ grams of added sugar per serving, with plain Greek yogurt mixed with a small amount of fresh fruit and cinnamon. This deliberate effort allows the palate to recalibrate. Over weeks, the intense sweetness that once felt necessary begins to taste cloying, signaling that you have successfully reclaimed your taste receptors. This is the strategic pathway to health, informed rejection leading to physiological adaptation, assuring that your commitment to longevity is reflected both in your choices and your subsequent vitality.